You're listening to the Stock Market Options Trading Podcast, a podcast helping retail traders like yourself get better results. If you enjoy listening to cutting-edge options research and trading strategies that help you make consistent gains in the stock market, be sure to subscribe now so you don't miss an episode. Now, here's your host, J. Eric O'Rourke.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Eric, and this is the Stock Market Options Trading Podcast, found on Apple, Spotify, many other podcast players, and you might even be listening to this on YouTube. Today, I'm going to talk about a pretty interesting website. You may have heard of it already. And what this website does, is totally free, by the way, is it sort of displays how many Robinhood users are holding a particular stock, and it kind of compares this with the current stock price. And the website is kind of being viewed as kind of a like sentiment style tool, and we'll talk a little bit more about some real examples. And it's really based on all the Robinhood users, not the entire market. They had one of the creators of the website on CNBC not too long ago, and basically what him and his partner did was, Robinhood has an API that shares this information, and they basically created a website that sort of takes that information in and displays it in some kind of meaningful way. So I thought it was pretty cool. There's some gotchas that we're going to talk about if you go over there and look at it. But let's back up just a little bit. So in case you've been under a rock maybe the past year or so, Robinhood, it's a newly very popular trading platform. I think it's grown to over 10 million users so far. You probably heard about it. It's all over the news. I think they started out with zero commissions, which really kind of shook the industry, and a lot of other bigger name brokerages kind of followed suit. Thinkorswim, I use Thinkorswim. But anyway, Robinhood's, it's pretty popular, and it's a very clean website. It's very easy to navigate. There's no sign up. Like, again, this is totally free. But this is basically how Robintrack works. So what the website does is about every hour, it takes the price and popularity, it pulls it out of the Robinhood API and then puts it into this website to display for you. I've navigated and looked around. It's a little, there's some delays. Sometimes things don't come up instantly. So it's not, I wouldn't try to look at this as some sort of real-time website, but the fact that it updates every hour, I think is pretty good for the type of information that it's sharing for you. So according to the website, every stock on Robinhood is downloaded and it's stored on the website, and it displays the data. And the two things that it's kind of looking for is the price and the popularity. And that's kind of what's displayed in a couple lines. And the price is obviously the price of the security. So, if you look at this compared to like an hourly chart of Apple or whatever stock it is you're looking at, the price chart would look pretty similar to what you'd see in another brokerage account. But then they have the popularity line, if you will, which shows basically the number of users who are holding some of that stock. So that's the general idea, comparing the price with the, and I'm air quoting here, popularity, right? So before we talk about kind of how you can use this or what they're at least saying you can use, I really want to give kudos to the guys who put this website together. I think, first of all, Robinhood for sharing this type of data in such a way that can be easily turned into a visual, I think is something new for the financial industry. So I really applaud both parties here, Robinhood and the guys who put the website together. But I want to talk a little bit about what they're saying, how you can use it. This is from the website, but there's a big caveat here, and we'll talk about that afterwards. So let's talk about what they say you could potentially use it for. And I mentioned before kind of a sentiment style. And one of the examples they show is a particular stock that the price was dropping in the stock, but the number of users holding the stock was increasing. So it was kind of like a contrarian indicator, if you will. We're saying, hey, even though the stock is dropping, the number of Robinhood users holding the stock is actually increasing. So they're calling this kind of a buy the dip sort of setup, right? Where even though it's dropping, so it's, you might want to consider that sort of a contrarian signal that the number of people who own it are increasing versus the actual price. So they call that the buy the dip sort of setup, if you will. The next one is sort of the opposite. A particular stock they highlighted was rising, and at the same time, the number of users was declining, almost like an X, right? Like one's going, the price is going from the bottom left to the top right, and the number of users is going from the top left to the bottom right. So this, what they're saying, could be an indication of people selling into the strength or taking profits during a particular run up. And the last sort of example they show you is they called it traders going full Momo. And basically what they're saying is the price of the stock is shown going higher and the number of users is also increasing. Therefore, and the way I would interpret that is kind of is that the price rise is being confirmed by the increase and number of users. So that's kind of what they're showing how this could work. And I do understand where they're coming from, but I still think there's kind of a big caveat here with that. So here's the problem for me. Here's the caveat with this information is there's a couple things. The first thing, let's just talk about what popularity means. And what's not shown here is any kind of volume. And just because more users are holding the stock, it really doesn't speak to how much volume is right? So it's not, the popularity just means if, are people buying one share or are they buying 1,000 shares? If everyone's buying one share, is that significant in the buy the dip example for example? So let's talk a little bit about comparing Robinhood to some other brokerages to kind of get a feel for how much of this could you believe in the sense of taking action on it, right? So first of all, let's just talk about Robinhood. And I pulled this off the internet. This may change over time. Some estimates that I've sort of seen thrown around is that the average account size at Robinhood is about $2,000. And they're estimating that the total AUM, or the assets under management for Robinhood at the time of, I'm doing this, they're estimated about $20 billion. So, not chump change. But if you think about 10 million accounts, if the average price is 2,000, you end up around 20 billion, I guess. In full sort of transparency, Robinhood doesn't display this. These are just estimates that I found on the internet. So, you may want to do your own research there to really kind of figure that out. But let's compare a couple other known brokerage houses. We're going to look at TD Ameritrade, which is, they do share that amount of money. TD Ameritrade owns Thinkorswim. That's who I trade with. Their total AUM, or assets under management, is about $1.3 trillion. So, just think about that. Even if they're estimating 20 billion, 30 billion from Robinhood, TD Ameritrade is 1.3 trillion versus billion. So it's a lot more, right? Charles Schwab, and this is surprising to me when I looked it up, Charles Schwab is 3.25 trillion. Right, and then you think about all the other big ones. We're just talking about some retail sites as well. So, so the takeaway, initially is that even though Robinhood is sharing this information, it's not sharing what the entire market is. I think this is an awesome idea. I wish there was a way to maybe publicly display this across brokerages, or maybe some bigger brokerage houses would display this, maybe a TD Ameritrade or a Schwab or something. But the fact that Robinhood is sharing this is a good idea, but it's just not significant enough to say that, a bunch of Robinhood users or a particular stock is increasing for Robinhood users. But does that mean that that dip buyers or sellers or whatever are really, is that what's really happening? If that's only a small percentage of the volume, if you will, because that's something we can't see. So the other little sort of caveat is the concept of popularity in the sense of a user holding a stock, right? So let's just say you have 100 shares of Apple or whatever, and you are a Robinhood user. You're going to show up on, in theory, you would show up in here as a holder of Apple, right? Well, if you never sell all your position, and let's say Apple has a huge run up and you sell half your position, then you would still be considered a user holding Apple. So, even though people are holding Apple, it doesn't mean that they aren't buying more or selling some at the same time. So it's hard for me to believe that just because the number of users is increasing, again, doesn't speak to how much volume is being, where the buying or selling is. You would still want to kind of cross-reference these moves in your own platform, maybe. And if you're like Thinkorswim, you could look at volume and some other things. But so again, that website is robintrack.net. I do think it's a really cool idea, and I think there's something here, but I just would caution you on taking it too, I don't want to say taking it too seriously, but just understanding that the significance of this data, the way it's being displayed, may not really be significant in the full marketplace, because just the number of asset or the amount of assets that it's displaying is a lot less because it's a newcomer to the field. Now, in 5 years, Robinhood could grow and these things could be more significant, or maybe E-Trade, IB, all these other brokerages, Tasty Trade, Thinkorswim, maybe they fall in line, and similar to the commissions, maybe they start rolling out some tools like this, and then maybe we could aggregate that data to see number of users and some other things. But anyway, it's an interesting thing. I think you should go check it out. Again, it's totally free. It's robintrack.net. That's ROBINTRACK.net. I'm going to put a link in the description. So if you're already if you're watching this on YouTube or in the podcast player, I'll put a link there so you can click over to it. And the podcast website is over at stockmarketoptionstrading.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for all the positive feedback I've been getting over on Patreon. I appreciate it. You guys have a great day, and we'll see you at the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Stock Market Options Trading Podcast. To join our community of options traders, head on over to patreon.com/vertical spread options trading for details. But before you go, you should know that everything discussed on this podcast and in this episode is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice of any kind.